What's up everyone, welcome back to part 2 of the toy train tutorial video. In today's video we're going to be going over the full UV mapping process, as well as preparing everything that we need for texturing in Substance Painter. So let's not waste any more time and let's just dive right into it. So when it comes to the UV mapping, there's really only one main tool I use to do the job, and I just kind of keep repeating the same process over and over again, using more or less the exact same tools. So for those main parts, I really like to break them up into 3 different parts. The first one is deleting your history, freezing transformations, and centering a pivot. The second part is doing a camera-based projection to remove all of the cuts on the model. The third step is using the 3D Cut and Sew UV tool to go ahead and start making cuts wherever you need them. And then finally, there is a fourth step, which is just unfolding it and laying it out in our UV editor. One quick thing, I'm just looking really fast, because I think all of these are a little high. So at this point, I like to kind of stand back, look at the model and see what I like and don't like. So one thing, I don't want all these wheels to be the exact same. Now I'm only going to UV, I think, one of them. So I can delete one of these. And what I'm going to do is actually just create a new cylinder. It's a lot easier sometimes than just trying to rework a shape. I'm going to rotate this, scale it nice and small, scale it in, just like our reference. These ones are a little bit different, and I kind of like that. So I can give these a nice big bevel. So that's what I'm going to do for these wheels. Now, we don't need to worry about all these other ones right now. We're going to go over the UV mapping. So when it comes to the UVs, it's honestly very straightforward. Like I said, I really only do one thing over and over again for everything. So let's go through that really quickly. One thing I am going to do is make sure I'm happy with these shapes. So right now, you can see this white edge. It's kind of pulling it, stretching it, because there's no supporting edge after this bevel. So I'm going to go in and add one edge loop, holding control, and add one right behind it. So now when I smooth it out, it doesn't look like it's stretching as much compared to this side. Compared to, you can still see obviously the white because that's the curved edge, but it's hard to tell, but it's kind of being stretched more, versus if I add an edge loop, it's going to retain that edge a little bit cleaner. So I'm just going to add that on the top first. Other than that, I think it's good to go. So one thing I like to do right away is highlight everything in my scene and just delete the history. This is going to take away any unnecessary groups, just random stuff. We can go through and delete the empty groups in here as well. And we're going to start with this front shape. So I'm going to start on the top of my outliner. Sometimes I like to group things as I go and name them. So we're just going to go through. So first thing to do is smooth this. We're happy with it. We're going to center pivot, delete history, and freeze the transforms. So it's all zeroed out here, no history, very nice. So we can go through and add a smoothing effect, because we're only previewing smooth it. So if I press 1, it unsmooths it. 3 will preview. So let's go up to mesh and go to smooth. Press 1 to not preview smooth the smooth. It's looking good. So all I can do now is open up my UV editor, which is this little green square at the top. I'm going to scale this down so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to start off with we'll delete history again because we smoothed it. Go up to UV and do a camera-based projection. So all these little white lines are little cuts. And as you can see, the UVs just are completely blown up. So if I go camera-based projection, it's going to delete all of those. Basically a clean slate, clean canvas to work with, which is what we want. So there's a few ways I could cut this. I think the easiest way is just doing one along an edge. So I always try to make my cuts along edges if I can, or behind faces. So for example, I'm going to do one along the edge up here, and I'm going to do one along the inside because we're not going to really see this angle too much. The front is more important. So now I can go to my UV editor, press W to get out of this tool, right click, go to UV shell, highlight the UVs, Control U to unfold. You can also find all of these under the modify, unfold, and there's also layout. So Control U unfolds it, and then Control L lays it out. And I can just roughly rotate my shell to be straight, and we can move on. I press the shaded option to make them all blue because no reason in particular. I'm just going to delete the history and move on to our second object. So I'm basically just going to rinse and repeat. So we're just going to delete history, freeze transforms, delete center pivot. I'm going to go up to UV, make sure it's smooth. So we're going to add a smooth to it, mesh smooth. Press 1 to unsmooth it. That looks smooth enough. And once again, delete history, UV camera-based projection. I'm going to do 2 cuts along the wheel. So 1 here, 1 here, 1 on the bottom. So when I go to UV shell and highlight the UVs, Control U, Control L, it just simply lays them out. And we can go take it a step further, and every shell that's nice and straight like this, well, we should just straighten. So unfold tool, straighten UVs. We can straighten the shell to be even straighter. That way it'll fit that much better in our UV editor. So we're gonna go wheel 1. This is gonna be top piece. I forget what they're called. The back wheel, we can do the same things. We're gonna go mesh smooth. Fun thing about cylinders like this is that they already come cut along the edges, so you can straight up just unfold it. But that's rare for other shapes, only for cylinders. So we can go ahead and straighten that UV shell as well. And be careful with UV shells, straightening them. If they're not straight, you can get weird stuff happening, but ones that are like that, I don't see why you wouldn't. We're going to delete history. So I use a soften edge because sometimes I get a hard edge on the edge there. We could take it a step further and smooth it again, but I don't think we really need to be honest. So we have copy, we're going to do wheel 2. And let's do our top piece. So delete history, mesh smooth. We're going to actually smooth this twice. So I'm going to go up to the smoothing, increase the subdivisions to 2 to give it some really nice curvature. Obviously, you don't have to make it that high in polys, but we are. Unhide it, or just isolate it to make it easier to work with. Camera-based projection, going back to my 3D Cut and Sew UV tool, which by the way, I should have probably mentioned at the beginning. It's at the very bottom of our UV tab, 3D Cut and Sew UV tool. And right click, go to component, edge. I want to make a cut on an edge. And I'm basically just going to cut off each end here. And I'm going to do 1 on the bottom, since you're not going to see the bottom. It's going to allow me just to lay it out a little bit cleaner. UV shell, unfold, Control U, Control L to lay it out. And you can also go through and straighten these. The only problem when you're really smoothing really high dense stuff, it takes a lot longer for it to smooth, and you have these weird, I mean this one's not a, maybe we can still do it with this one because it's not too crazy. When you have a lot of like little curvature going on, like you see all the little polys in the corners, well it can take longer, and sometimes it's just not worth it if it's not going to really improve the shape too much. But I try to straighten my shells whenever I can. So that's good. We'll call this roof. Next is this little front piece. So let's just make sure the backs are deleted. Let's go mesh smooth. Delete history, freeze transform, center pivot. A shape like this, you don't need any cuts. Let's go camera base to remove all the cuts, and let's just unfold it. If you go to the little checkerboard here on the top, you can see if it's stretching. Now, of course, this is going to stretch a little bit because we didn't add any cuts, but it's not stretching nearly enough that we have to worry about it. So we can leave it as is. This is the front piece. This will be the axle. We can delete both sides of the cylinder, and it already comes with the cut, so we can just Control U, lay it out, and make sure to do a nice little straight. Perfect. Delete. Center pivot, freeze transforms. And this is like our, let's say a hub. I don't know what we're going to call it, but a hub makes sense. So mesh smooth. Same thing, G, just to repeat. This is already pre-cut for us because it's a cylinder, so that's nice. You can actually straighten out this edge if we want to. Control L. And same with this one. Let's do center freeze, center pivot, freeze transformation, delete history. Do a camera-based projection. We're gonna just isolate it so it's easier to view. And for a shape like this, I'm going to just make one cut. Actually, we're not gonna make any cuts. I don't think we have to. It's not gonna stretch it too much. In our hub, we can just highlight them all and Control L to lay all of those shells out. All right, so this hub, we're going to, rather than re-UVing it, we're gonna duplicate it, Control select the second one, and align it to that. And these hubs, I'm just gonna keep in one group together. So we're gonna go Control G. So I want the shells to overlap, so we can just kind of move them aside. I always use this grid as like my, kind of like an empty canvas. You can move these shells over wherever you want as you're organizing things. And you'll see later when we organize our shells at the end, it just makes it easier. So let's do this piece as well. So let's go into here. Let's add an actual smooth to it. Mesh smooth. Nice and smooth, very dense. You don't need to do this much. In fact, you can go through afterwards and just remove unnecessary polys if you really want to, that don't affect the shape. If you're just keeping one mesh, for example, you really don't need to subdivide it so much, but we will. Delete history, freeze transforms, center pivot, UV camera-based projection. Let's go in with that 3D cut and sew UV tool, right click, component, edge. Let's start cutting out some edges. So I want one that's going to be along my window frame. And we'll do one that's in the corner so we can lay it out. We'll do the same to the other side. Ideally around edges. It's hard on really big bevels, but we're going to choose one of these ones. We're going to choose another edge. Basically just choosing all of our edges. And we can keep the front as one large one. I don't want to see any UV seams on those. So let's just unfold, highlight them all, Control U, Control L. Now as you can see, this is not right because we forgot to add a cut. Sometimes after you unfold it, you can notice where your imperfections are or where your errors are. So what we're going to do really quickly is just add one in the corner here, one in the corner here. It doesn't matter, you're not going to see the inside. Let's add one along here. So it cuts that off. That could be one shell, and this probably could be a shell. What we'll do is add one here. Just to separate some, let's try unfolding it again and laying it out. So this one's looking a little strange. We don't need to have it so big. I feel like this is going to take up weird space in our UV editor. Sometimes I go in and add cuts, especially in areas you're not going to see them, just to make it easier to lay out. So you'll see that shape just changes. This one as well. It's a little weird. We don't necessarily need to have no cuts here, so what we can do is just add one cut. It's really up to you. Obviously, the least amount of cuts, the better, because you're going to see But see how it's straightened those shells up? It's just gonna make it a lot easier to stack them all together. So I'm gonna align or rotate these now, basically the best I can to make them straight. You can't straighten UVs on shells like this because they're not perfectly straight and you're gonna get some weird errors. And you can push it as much as you want with tools in here like the optimize tool and unfold tool. We're not gonna get that complex. We're just making something easy. Highlight all those, Control L, lay those out as well. And a good way to check after is checkerboard, see if anything is stretching, and it looks great. So we're not going to need to do anything. This will be our walls. Same thing here, just a mesh smooth, delete the history, freeze transform, center pivot, and just do a camera based. So we don't need to make any cuts for that. And just the base. So I can highlight it, actually add a smoothing effect to it, mesh smooth. One smoothing is fine. Take off checkerboard, sometimes it's hard to see. And very straightforward, we're gonna do the exact same thing. Camera-based projection, go in with our 3D cut and sew UV tool, do a cut along the edge. We're gonna do one cut along the front edge, I think makes the most sense. One along the back. Now, if you go directly on the edge, you're gonna see it's not gonna loop around, which you can still do. But sometimes I find it's just easier doing the one right behind it because it allows you to loop right around and cut it all off. I think that makes sense. The other ones we're gonna do is just underneath. We could do it on the bottom, but I don't think we're going to. Unfold. There's no real right or wrong way either, depending on where you want your cuts. So just try to make your cuts in areas that are not going to be viewable by the camera. That way you can see, the transitions between the materials, between those seams are going to be a little, I'm not going to add a cut on this edge because you'll see that material difference, but you're not going to see underneath here or on a very hard edge like on this edge. So just try to keep in mind like where you want your UV cuts to be. You can go as far as like maybe you do no cut along the top and you stop it right here on the edge and you do one along the bottom. So you don't see any cut along the top. There's lots of little cool tricks you can do. Like for example, I'll show you. You can let's undo, basically press Control just to deselect that one cut. So all my other cuts are still there. What we're gonna do is just one along the actual edge. One along that edge. I'll show you really quick. So now it looks like it's one shell, but if I unfold it, now I'm getting no cut along this edge. So you're gonna see nice curvature in the material, whereas before I had a cut along the top. So it really depends on how, I could do that on the back too. It's not really important, I don't think, on a model like this, but there's so many different ways you can cut it depending on how you're planning for it to be viewed or the importance of certain edges and where you want to not see the seams. So try to hide them whenever you can. All right, then we have this last engine piece. I guess it's called the engine. I don't know what this is called. We're gonna call it an engine. And same thing, I'm just gonna do a smooth, looks good. That's fine. Delete history, freeze transform, center pivot, UV camera base once again along edges. So we're gonna do one along that edge. We're gonna do, you know what? We're actually just gonna do one along here and not do any cuts on that one. So you can just unfold it. Lay it out, and as you can see, it looks nice and clean. So what I like to do is now select all my objects that are in this one cart. So let's actually add this thing into it. So let's fix the shape really quick. Make sure we're happy with the shape before smoothing. Mesh smooth. Same thing, UV camera base, do a cut along the inside. We can select all of these and group them. This will be our cart 1. So now when I go through, I don't have to do my wheels. I can just duplicate my wheel. Oh, we need my hubs in here as well. And we're just gonna repeat that exact same process for all the other carts. So I'm not gonna walk through or talk because we're gonna do the exact same process. I'm making it do, delete history, freeze transform, center pivot, camera-based projection to remove all the cuts, and then using that 3D cut and sew UV tool, we can go through and make our cuts wherever we want them. Then we select the shells, lay them out, and unfold them. So I'm gonna go through and do all the other ones before we organize our shells. That way we can then go through that process together of how we're gonna actually organize it. And keep in mind, if you wanna see the full process, it will be available on my Patreon page, which you can find in the link in the description below. For now, let's just quickly jump ahead to where we just do what we just did with this one cart to all of the other carts in our scene. All right, so I went ahead and just UV'd a few of the objects. So these are actually the only ones that I UV'd. Since we're gonna duplicate this over to the back, I don't need to just do my work twice. So same with the wheels, I only really need to only UV 1, even though I UV'd 2. I just duplicated it over, but you get the idea. So what we're gonna do is start organizing these UVs. So I'm gonna go through my first cart first. And I like to just group up the ones that I know are gonna share the same UV space. In this case, it's only the hubs. I don't want the wheels. I feel like having different markings and scratches on them would just help make it look unique. So I'm gonna keep these as separate UV shells, but these ones I'm gonna move to the side. So when it comes to organizing my UVs, I like to basically, like I mentioned earlier, I like to use this as my canvas to kind of organize my shells before I put them in this 0 to 1 space. So if you're fairly new to UV mapping, if you're doing texture sets, you need to lay them out all within this 0 to 1 space. 0 to 1 meaning this is a 0 point and this goes to 1 up here and it goes to 1 over here. So this little box is where you have to squeeze all your UV shells into. And this is also something to keep in mind if you're doing 4K textures. Well, this is a 4K size. So if you have a little UV shell that's this size, like a small one, it's not actually 4K because you're using part of those pixels. So it's actually less, if that makes any sense. So you have to kind of be strategic in the sense of how you lay out your UV shells so you can get nice detail on certain objects depending on which ones you're planning to add more detail to. So if I'm planning to add like a text like Polly's train or something on the side, well, I can't have this shell really small or those little letters and words are gonna be a little pixelated because it doesn't have a lot of pixels to work with. So just something to keep in mind. Stuff like this, they're so small, I can really shrink these down if I want. So since I know these are all gonna be unique and I'm not going to be duplicating or stacking any of these UV shells, I'm just gonna go ahead and lay them all out. So I'm gonna highlight all those shells and go Control U. Or sorry, Control L for layout. So lay them all out, which is nice, but as you can see, there's a lot of wasted space here. We obviously need to fit in our other trains as well. I was debating if you want to have 1 or 2 textures. Maybe we'll have 2 textures for this one to make our lives a little easier, but we'll just try to squeeze as much as we can into this space. So one thing I like to do is start looking at which UV shells are really not important. So which ones, for example, the bottom of this, you're never gonna really see. So what I like to do, and keep in mind, if you're working in a team and you have to have, a specific textile density, you can't always do this workflow. But when you're working on your own assets, this is something I like to do. So I'll move my shells that are less important, like this one, for example, to the side. And And let's go through and see if there's any other ones here. The axle is really not important since you're not going to see it much. Let's move that to the side. And that's basically it. I guess this whole inside shell, to be honest, is not really important since you're not going to see it. Let's grab this one, and let's grab this one. You can move those to the side. Maybe this one as well. I mean, this is not too important, but we'll leave it in since it's the outside. So let's start with something like this. So now I'll take all my more important shells, like these, and I'll relay them out. So what I like to do is basically come through and see if I can squeeze any of these into better places. So what is this shell? If you're unsure, sometimes you can just move it. So this is underneath. You're never actually going to see this. I'm going to move this to the side as well. And let's relay those out, see if we can squeeze them in nicer. All right. So what I'm going to do is take this and rotate it. Sometimes if you rotate your things different ways, you can just fit them in better places. So I'm going to squeeze this one down here. This one's, I'm going to rotate. I feel like I can fit things better if it's rotated this way. All right, so we have, so all these shells, for example, I could definitely straighten them. Now I'm recording, so it might take just an extra second, but as you can see, I'm just going to straighten these, which is going to allow me to fit these shells a little bit more snug together, rather than having a curve and having this wasted space all around that shell. So these ones are rounded, so I can't really straighten those, but those ones I can. So let's go ahead and let's relay these out. I actually don't like how it did that, so I'm going to Control Z. I'm quickly just going through, selecting these. These are the inside ones, which are less important. We can probably shrink those down as well, since you're not going to see them. And we can place these in certain areas. Let's move this stuff around. Okay. Now obviously you can spend a little bit more time organizing, but I think that will do. So let's go ahead and let's shrink these ones down. Since I don't need to have detail in them, they can be quite small, all of these shells. Sometimes easier to lay these ones out and then just move them over, so now they're fit together really nicely, and you can go ahead and further find places to fit these shells. So let's maybe add one here. Something like that. So now we have our first cart UV'd, which is great. So I'm debating if I want to have this. You know what we can do is actually have this piece this one is going to be part of our first texture, just to fit, since we have more space to work with. So what I'm going to do, since this is going to be repeating from this cart, a lot of the wheels, we don't have to worry about it too much. So let's quickly look at which ones are important. This one's important, of course. These are, this is the top. This is the bottom. This can almost even be deleted, or it's a side. So these are really not important. Move those to the side. This is the bottom, which you don't even see. So these are really my important shells. So we want to make sure that these ones are the biggest. So what I'm going to do is actually take a chunk of this out. Let's go ahead and move this guy in. Now this one I can actually straighten as well. There's no curved pieces, so I'm going to go and straighten UV shell. It's going to allow me to fit this one a little bit nicer. And this is the top. I'm going to go ahead and fit this one in as well. Now these ones are still important, so this is going to be straighten the V shell actually. We're gonna try to fit these ones back in now. So this one's quite important since it's a circle. Let's just move this so we can see what we're doing. I'm gonna rotate that to fit it in a little bit better. This can actually all be dragged over now. Let's see if we can fit the stuff in. And what is the stuff? This is all my less important stuff too, so we can actually get quite small with these. That's the under. We can just squeeze this one in since you're not going to see it. So I can have different textile density on these ones because these ones are really not important, so we can actually go through and straighten these shells out as well since there's no curvature in them. This one does, so I'm going to keep this one. But, oh, let's not forget about our little hubs here, which can be quite small as well. We can find some places for these to fit. And we just need to worry. So the biggest one I want to worry about, I like the walls. I feel like these are more important than the other ones. So we're going to just move some stuff around. Try to make some more room. So all I'm doing is just continuously playing around with these shapes, seeing what works, what doesn't. This one's more important than that bottom one. So maybe we'll find a little spot for this. Where can we fit this one? I'm just quickly zooming out so we can fit one for sure down here. I'm not sure if this should be larger because you can kind of see the inside, and this can be really small since we're not going to see the inside of the walls on this first cart here. That should do. These we can move to better spots like here. Let's fill in some of these circles. These are actually more important, so I'm going to move these here. You can grab them and shrink them down until they both fit. And then we just have this last one, which is really, you're never going to see it. I can probably just delete it, but we're going to keep the polys in the scene. But if you're trying to cut back on polys, this would be a great one. If I isolate it, it's just the bottom here, and you actually don't see them at all, just barely. So you could just move it down more and delete it, but we'll keep it. So this will be our first texture. So let's change the group name so we know. So then we have this one finished. Sometimes you can highlight all the shells if you're in checkered board up here, and you can just see how things are looking, but that looks great. Let's go to cart 2. We're gonna do the exact same process. So I have no groups because there's no duplicating items. I do want to keep my wheels. I guess these hubs could probably be the same overlapping. So let's just move those aside. And I'll group them so I know. Center pivot. The axles can also group center pivot. Now we're going to make duplicator wheels over in a second. I just want to organize these shells really quick. One thing you can do also if you're having two objects, you can rotate one so they do look different. Like for example, these hubs, I can flip one. The details on one side will be different, and we can add a smooth. There we go. Little tricks, like at these wheels, for example, they're going to be sharing the same UV space. So let's group our wheels. And to avoid seeing repeating patterns, we can just flip one. And they'll look like two different wheels, maybe rotated a little bit. When in reality, they're the exact same texture. So all of these, let's select and let's lay them out. All right, so we're gonna go through the same process. I'm gonna find my inside shells like this one, this one, this one. All of these I do not need. Well, I technically need, but I'll lay them out so they're sized the same. I can grab all my important shells. Maybe this one's not as important either. And lay those out. This now makes those shells a little bit bigger so I can fit them together. See, this is what happens when you don't straighten shells. Ooh, let's cancel that. I pressed straighten shells on this big shell. I thought for some reason it was, as you can see, it kind of blows up because it's not a straight piece. But we can shrink this down the littlest bit to fit in here. Okay, so we can go through, straighten some shells out as well, like we did last time. This is probably a good example of what I mean. So I'm going to straighten this. It's kind of messed up. Optimize tool, which is not the right one. You can do this tool. This is the unfold tool, so I'm kind of doing circles, unfolding it nicely in the way I kind of want to bend it, and we can straighten it again. Do a little unfold, straighten again. There, and there's no red. Oh, down here. So there's actually this little piece going right here, so it's never going to actually straighten out nicely. So we can't do it to this one. I'm going to unfold it, keep it slightly bent. Oh, these are the window frames, so these just are not being cut all the way. So let's just select this. There's something obviously going on here because we did a bad bevel right here. Something was messed up. We're not going to worry about that right now, but this would be worth going back and fixing because we just had either an edge that we didn't want selected that was selected, but we're just going to do that so we can actually unfold these so they're nice and straight. Okay, let's select our groups again, unfold. All right, let's just fit this one back in like we did earlier. There's no point taking up that space. Okay, so now we can go through like we did last time and fit in our other UV shells. This one's the top, this one's the two sides, and this is the bottom. So these are probably more important. So we'll do these next. So as you can see, I like to just organize my more important shells depending on how they're looking in your scene. So actually what we can do is take these, rotate them. We can have better usage of the space. Let's just rotate them up here. This can go over here. These can be rotated to fit better as well. We'll just move these little ones to a different spot. This is not an important shell, so I'm not too worried about it. That's why we're just gonna move it down. This looks like it's like over top, I'm gonna unfold this one again. There we go. And this one can just be smaller. We can move this one back. All right, so we have our second one done. And what we're gonna do with this second cart is we're just gonna duplicate it, slide it over back here. And I'm gonna hide it so I can take everything in this one and just delete it. Since we have them now sharing the same UV space. And there's things we can do as well if we don't want to see repeating patterns. We can center the pivot. I'm gonna take these three and just group them really quick. Center pivot so I can rotate it around. You're not gonna notice a difference. So if we have a detail on this side, it's gonna be on the opposite side of this one. So they're gonna look like two different carts when they're actually the same. And this is going to have the same bottom as one of these. So I'm just going to duplicate this one over. We can delete the other one if we can click it. Where is it? There it is. These wheels as well, we're going to duplicate them, bring them over. Or actually, delete those. We need the axles as well. Duplicate, bring these over. Delete these ones. And the tires that we don't need. Awesome. Let's just rotate some of these so they all look different from one another. Maybe this one we rotate back so one of them is okay. All right, so next is these can also, I'm just duplicating, these can all be layered on top. Such a small detail. That's not important. I can. Oh, they're both. Duplicate, align it right in the middle, take the one that's not UV, delete. So we're just reusing the same one. So this, for example, can be the same position as here. Let's just rotate it like we did before. We could take our non-UV'd one, delete it. Or take our wheels, and let's just duplicate those over as well. So we're just trying to reuse a lot of the same UVs. There we go. And this one doesn't need one on the back. All right, so next what we're gonna do is duplicate all of our wheels. Over. So what we can do is make sure they're all looking fine. We have them all selected. So what we can do is duplicate, slide them over. And the thing is, if we flip them right now, you're gonna see these little like hubs rotate. So I'm actually gonna leave it, and what I'm gonna do is just position my wheel first. The axle's gonna be too long, so we do need to shorten our axle. We'll worry about that in a sec. So I have all my wheels positioned except for my front ones. So you can unhide those, slide these wheels out, take out those wheels, and then we can move our hubs out. These ones we can deselect, these ones we can close in. And then all of our axles are just a little long, which I didn't catch earlier, so it's not a big deal. We can go through and just select these and drag them over. All right, so we have our carts. So now that we have our UVs done, we have text 1, text. Oh, this. Or the wrong. It's unfortunate because I duplicated over the wrong wheel. So let's just do this. So this one's fine. Let's hide it. Sometimes it's easier to do this. This is extras. Yeah, we can delete those. This we can just duplicate back. Cart 2. So what I'm going to do is just select all of my wheels in my scene, since these are all sharing the same UV space. I kind of messed up and didn't UV these ahead of time. So cart 3, I'm just going to move these over. Basically just moving all my stuff over that I don't need. Cart 4 has all the axles as well. There we go. Cart 2 just has this, which is my wheels. I forgot these wheels too. As you can see, I just forgot to slide over 2 wheels, or 4 wheels, I guess, technically. But this cart, move those wheels aside. Okay. So now if I highlight them all, they're not overlapping. I have to basically find room in here. So let's look at what we got. We have this pole, which can be very small. We have our wooden poles, which are down here. These are pretty important. Let's move our important shells to the top. Less important ones, like our axles, to the bottom. Wheels are pretty important. Hubs are not important. So we're trying to prioritize our wheels, for example. What we can do is just delete these ones. Let's just take all of these and line them over. That way this all sharing the same UV space. All my wheels. So for this one, let's see quickly in this texture set. Sometimes I go back to other ones and see if I have any extra room I can use, but that one seems fine. So what we're going to do, these are the window frames. These are not as important. We can slide those over. This can be rotated. You just have to play around with things until it fits. So we can fit these ones together. Let's move these aside, this aside. And then we have more room down here for our more important shells, like our wood pieces. Oh, let's move them like this. These we can straighten. Deselect. So I'm just going through and basically finding spots for these to fit. And our tires, which are also pretty important. Now, I might actually move these. I like the detail of the tires, so I actually want these to be really large. So we're gonna actually fill in that area for our tire. The wood I can find other spots for, so one can go here. This one might fit up here. Alright, our window frames, which aren't as important, we can shrink them down. I don't think you're going to see that detail. These are my hubs, so I can just fill in some of these windows. None of those are overlapping. You don't want UV shells to overlap. And our last one are our axles, which is very small since it's not important. We can squish it in here. Oh, I only selected one. Let's select all of those. I can actually move these. So as you can see, it just got to play around, move things around until it looks better. So if I highlight them all, there's nothing that looks crazy. The only thing we want is not a lot of repeating patterns on these. So I'm just gonna basically rotate some. You can flip some around so they don't have repeating patterns. Let's rotate this one. Should be good enough. Rotate some of these around. Okay, so we basically have our train complete at this point. So this will be technically our second texture group. So let's group and call it text 2. And now we just want to position our train so it just looks more interesting. I feel like if it's nice and, well, perfectly straight, that's not fun. There's a couple little things we need to do before we jump into texturing. So one of them is I'm just going to move our whole train more in the middle. I'm going to add in a plane. So I'm going to scale this really big. And this is our floor. So I'm just going to basically raise this up. And we're going to have to eyeball it. But we're going to start with our front train first, putting those wheels on the floor. And then, as you can see, this is all sitting high. So we can select all of these and just drag them down. And this is the only hook we need to position a little bit lower. So now we know it's all aligned accurately to our floor, which is important. And now we just need to turn it so it looks more fun. So basically what you can do since these are all in the same texture group. Okay, so what I'm going to do actually first is assign a material to each texture. So I'm going to go assign a material. In this case, I'm just going to choose like a blend. You can really choose whatever you want. We're going to call it text 1. This right click, new material. I'm just going to put a blend as well. And put texture 2. So now I can go through, and what I'm going to do, and the reason why I assign my materials first is because I want to actually group my carts so I can rotate them. So I'm just going to group this one, center the pivot. I'm going to group this one. which is going to mess up my groups, but just because I want to kind of stage it, so we're going to group up all of our train carts depending on which ones they are. So group, and this will leave this one here. So now I can go through and I'm going to change the pivot point. Actually, we don't really have to. We can just rotate it. Move this one over here. Let's go to our third one. I'm going to rotate this more like so. Maybe more? What do you guys think? I don't know, should we turn that way or the other way? Maybe let's go the other way. And I didn't know if I wanted to keep them all, but we're going to keep them all. And our last group. I'm not sure if we should do something like this, or if I should have it more of like an S shape, where like maybe this is like back like that. I wish I could hear your opinions, because I'm curious. Like, does that look cool versus the other way? Kind of like that. Not sure if I like that or just like one big turn. We'll keep it like this for now. We can always change it later. And then we can just group all of them into one master group and call it our toy train. And just like that, we are ready for Substance Painter. So now all we have to do is export this. So go File, Export Selection. It's nice to do selection because if you have anything hidden in your scene, you're unsure if you go export all, maybe you grab something else in your scene. Well, we just want to select our specific objects, these, and then you just choose a place for it. So I made a group. We can call it Toy Train as an FBX file, and then export. All right, so now we just need to jump over to Substance, and we can start the whole texturing process. And don't forget, if you want to see the full UV mapping process, it will be available on my Patreon page, which you can find the link in the description below. And one little quick thing I noticed, which would be kind of cool to make it. So if you go change it to object, we can just slide some of these maybe back a bit. I feel like nothing's perfect, and it really makes it feel a bit more realistic when things are, you know, not perfect. Maybe something like that. Little details. Anyways, all right, let's start the texturing process.